JCPOA was a fundamentally flawed deal, and there will have to be a new deal. Now, I believe that Iran has every right to enrich uranium, that Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty gives them that right. But we have to deal with, realities. As long as Israel exists and Israel exerts influence on the United States, it's politically impossible for any American president to allow an Iranian nuclear program that provides the theoretical pathway to a nuclear weapon. So there must be a deal that permanently shuts that pathway, that provides restrictions on Iran's nuclear program, that prevents Iran from, enriching uranium to a higher level, not allowing them to accumulate stockpiles of uranium and enriched uranium. That deal was negotiated in February. For all the people out there saying, Scott, who are you to tell the Iranians what to do? I hear that all the time. You ignorant son of a bitch, you're just anti-Iranian and all that. Town sand, puds, you don't know what you're talking about. The Iranians already agreed to this deal. What do you think the deal was that the Omani foreign minister was taking to Washington, D.C. on 26 February? So fuck off. The deal has been made. It exists. It's reality. You guys live in a fictional world. The same people that say Iran must have a nuclear weapon. No, they mustn't. They don't want one. Why do people want to give Iran something they don't want? Do they not understand that a non-nuclear armed Iran beat two nuclear armed powers? That the ballistic missile program of Iran and the ability to put the chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz gives Iran strategic leverage it needs against two nuclear armed powers. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, it would legitimize everything the United States and Israel has said about Iran and mobilize global support to take Iran down. So Iran doesn't need a nuclear weapon. They don't want a nuclear weapon, and nobody should be encouraging them to get a nuclear weapon. Iran got to the position they are today by not having nuclear weapons and not pursuing nuclear weapons, and they're winning across the board. So I do believe that on the nuclear side, there's a deal to be made, and it must be made because we have to deal with political realities, not the fake world that people want to live in where equities abound. We don't live in that world. We live in a world where Israel, an illegally armed nuclear power, I get it. And I do think the world should spend more time talking about Israel's nuclear weapons and how to get rid of them. But we're talking about now, present Iran. Iran will not be able to dictate Israel's unilateral disarmament. That's a flawed thinking, a fantasy world you live in. What we can do is dictate the terms which allow the sanctions that have been imposed on Iran linked to a nuclear program to be lifted, empowering Iran to have an economy for the first time in 50 years. You want to speak of Iran emerging as a global power? Watch. It's not going to be from trick plays. Iran's not going to become a global power because they can shut down the Strait of Hormuz or they can shut down cable. Those are trick plays. That's like saying I'm going to win the Super Bowl because I've mastered the hook and ladder. Well, you can throw the hook and ladder one time, score a touchdown, and that's it. The trick play's done. Iran has these little short-term trick plays. In the long term, Iran becomes a global power by integrating its economy into BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, by bringing Russia and China so close that nobody will dare try to disrupt that. I mean, this is the what needs to happen. The sanctions must be lifted so that Iran can hug Russia and Iran can hug China so tightly, nobody will ever be able to come in and say, we're going to go to war against Iran again, because that means automatically going to war against Russia and China. That couldn't have happened earlier because the Iranians are reticent against that kind of relationship. Remember, the Russians negotiated a strategic framework agreement with the Iranians back in January, February of this year. But the Iranian parliament sat on it, didn't ratify of last year. The Iranian parliament didn't ratify. In June, when Israel attacked and the United States attacked, everybody's like, where's Russia? They're a bad ally. I'm like, no, the Iranians didn't ratify the agreement. There's no legal framework for Russia to support Iran on right now. Now, the Iranians have rectified that, and since then, Russia has been providing assistance. I don't know what kind of framework agreement exists with China. I do know that Chinese are providing assistance, but what I do know is once this war ends and the sanctions are lifted and restrictions are removed, you're going to see Iran hug both Russia and China and draw them in. And Russia and China are going to do the same thing because Iran is essential to the future economic growth of both nations. The Russians need it for north-south connectivity from St. Petersburg to Chabahar, and the Chinese want to keep that new Silk Road going. So, and this is a game changer. Once you get Iran to hug Russia and China, make that pivot decisively. Again, one of the greatest strategic failures of the West was to fail to recognize that for a long time, up until recently, there were many Iranians that didn't want to make that pivot to the East, that many Iranians wanted to continue to have good, sound relations with the West, that they believed in the economic potential of reopening relations with the West. That's over. That's the other thing that nobody talks about. That's over. Iran will never link itself to the West now. That day is finished. That boat has sailed. Iran is has pivoted to the East. And now when sanctions lift, you're going to see an economic embrace that's going to make Iran that fourth most powerful nation in the world. Yeah. Clear once we're very quickly. But I believe that that's because Russia was going to bring the totality of its military capabilities to bear on Ukraine, that they were actually fighting a war. Turns out they were fighting a special military operation that was designed to get Ukraine to the negotiating table. It's something that everybody missed. I missed it. The director of the CIA missed it. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Nobody in the world, because we didn't understand what a special military operation was. Now that we've learned, and we realize that this is about Russia fighting a long-term war of attrition, not just against Ukraine but the collective West. We are looking at this long drawn-out affair. But when the United States made the decision to create the new Lend-Lease back in May of 2022. I called it a game-changing moment. I got in a lot of trouble there. People were like, oh, you're a flip-flopper. No, I'm not a flip-flopper. I'm just a good analyst who is able to absorb new data and factor it into my assessments. That's what good analysts do. And it was a game changer. It changed the nature of the game. I have been saying that Russia is going to, fight this long drawn out war of attrition because all of the advantages accrue to them. The clock isn't an issue. That's no longer the case. And that's why we've seen such a dramatic shift taking place here. The Ukrainian European allies have created a new reality. And that is that Ukraine has strategic debt about this back in 2022. I said, it's very dangerous for NATO to become the logistics base of this proxy conflict.